All right, let's just jump right in. Right now, the world is going through this massive strategic reshuffle. I mean, the old rulebook is pretty much out the window. Power is shifting all over the place, and countries, well, they're being forced to adapt or risk getting left behind. So today, we're going to break down this incredible transformation. You know, the choice that nations are facing today it's incredibly stark. We're not just talking about picking a few new allies or signing some trade deals anymore. This is really about survival in a world that's become a lot more competitive and, frankly, a lot more fractured. And this quote right here from Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England, it just captures the stakes perfectly. So, are you a player? Someone with a seat at the table, helping decide what happens next? Or are you simply on the menu, just waiting to be consumed by more powerful forces? That question, that's the absolute core of this whole great reshuffle. So you have to ask, why is all of this happening right now? What's the big deal? Well, it's not like one single thing just happened. It's actually a combination of these really powerful global forces that are all coming together at once and just completely reshaping the international landscape. It really boils down to four key forces at play here. First up, we're moving from a unipolar world, one dominated by a single superpower, to a multipolar one, where you've got several different centers of influence. Then you got the world's economic center of gravity, which is very clearly shifting from the West to the East. Third, the intense competition between the US and China that's forcing literally every other nation to figure out how to navigate this tricky new reality. And finally, you have these nationalist policies, like America's America First approach, which have really shaken up old alliances and basically hit the accelerator on this whole global reshuffle. So, where do we start to see this playing out? Well, the first and most visible adjustment countries are making is all about the economy. They are literally redrawing the maps of trade and investment. And, as they say, the best way to understand what's really going on is to just follow the money. And this slide right here shows just a tectonic shift in global trade. I mean, for decades, the US was the European Union's #1 trading partner. But since 2020, that title now belongs to China. And at the same time, look at the global south. It has pivoted dramatically. It now trades more with China than with the US. This isn't just some small adjustment. This is a fundamental redrawing of the entire world's economic map. And you know what? This shift wasn't an accident. It was a very deliberate strategy. You can see it right here. When faced with a trade war from Washington, Beijing made a calculated pivot. So while its exports to the US went down, its trade with key partners like Southeast Asia and Europe absolutely boomed. It's a textbook example of a successful economic adjustment in this new age. Okay, another huge piece of this puzzle is the rise of what's called South-South trade. Basically, that's just trade between the developing nations in the global South. And look at this. It now accounts for about a quarter of all global trade. That's massive. It just goes to show that these countries are increasingly looking to each other for economic growth, and they're charting their own course. So what kicked this change into high gear? Policy. It's estimated that a staggering 40 to 45% of the growth in that South-South trade since 2018 is a direct result of the disruption caused by US tariffs. So what does that really mean? It means one superpower's policies actually pushed a whole bunch of countries to find new partners and way faster than they might have otherwise. Now, all this money moving around, it doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? These economic shifts are happening side by side with some major geopolitical realignments. As countries find new economic partners, they're also kind of picking new teams on the world stage. So what we're seeing is the rise and strengthening of these non-Western clubs, these organizations that give these countries a much bigger collective voice. You've got groups like the expanded 11-member BRICS economic bloc, the security-focused Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the really influential Gulf Cooperation Council. They're all becoming these key platforms for countries to coordinate outside of that traditional Western framework. And all this gives rise to the big buzzword of this new era, multi-alignment. The smart play now, it isn't about picking one side anymore. It's the strategy of keeping good relationships with competing powers, like both the US and China. And why would you do that? Well, it allows a country to play that rivalry to its own advantage, which maximizes its own leverage and its freedom to act. Europe is a perfect case study of this. I mean, think about it. For decades, Europe pretty much counted on the US as its main security blanket. But after years of friction and a real breakdown of trust, European leaders are now pushing for something they call strategic autonomy. They've basically realized they can't longer count on the US in the same way, so they have to build up their own capacity to stand on their own 2 feet. And we're seeing a really similar story play out in the Middle East. With this perception that America is sort of disengaging from the region, powers like Saudi Arabia are diversifying like crazy. They're not putting all their eggs in one basket anymore. They're building new defense deals with countries like Pakistan, and at the exact same time, they're opening up diplomatic channels with rivals like Iran and strengthening their ties with China. They are expanding their options big time.
So all of this upheaval, this dispersal of economic and political power, it's creating a really fascinating outcome. We're in what you could call the middle power moment. A whole new class of influential player is emerging on the world stage.
So, what's the playbook for these rising middle powers? Well, it's kind of like a four-step process. First, as global power spreads out, it creates an opening for them. Then, the rivalry between the US and China creates this vacuum that really savvy countries can use to increase their own leverage. This allows them to carve out a much more independent path for themselves. A country like Turkey, for example, has absolutely masterfully played this game to become a much more powerful actor than it was just a decade ago.
So what does this all add up to? It means the old, predictable world order is gone. It's over. And that brings us right back to that powerful metaphor we started with, the table and the menu.
And this quote from Alec Russell at the Financial Times just sums it up beautifully. The age of the Western set menu is over. Where the options were limited and pretty much decided for you, that's a thing of the past. Today, a new global menu is being written. And yet, the two lead chefs, the US and China, they're incredibly influential, but a whole lot of other players are now demanding to add their own dishes to the list. Which, of course, leaves us with the critical question for the future. As this new menu of global power is being written in real time, the challenge for every single nation on Earth is to figure out how to earn its seat at the table, because the alternative is to simply be on it.